Hi there, welcome to this Tableau project where we will going to find the answer with the help of Tableau data visualization techniques. So data visualization is a core part of Tableau, as you would know, and with the help of this data, which is a real data, we will try to find the answers and build the visualization. So if you are a beginner or a Tableau developer or a data visualization developer whose day-to-day job is to answer the questions with the help of the data visualization, I think you should watch it till the end, because we will take a stab at each question and take a step-by-step approach to find the answers. And during that, I will show you some tips and tricks as well as some various data visualization techniques that you can apply to get the better answers from the questions that I will be showing you. And in the end, I will give you one assignment which will help you take your data visualization skills to a next level, which is based on all of the questions which we will be answering. So I highly recommend that you see this entire project step by step, so that in the end, when you will do the assignment, you will find it very easy as well as very intriguing, because it can go in any way. I mean, if there are like 5 different people who are watching this video, can come up with 5 different answers to that challenge or to that problem, and every solution is good. It's about your creativity. So I will give you this creative assignment, which I will be really happy to see what you are coming up with. All right, so let's go ahead and start the questions. So the first question is, how is the overall situation of total parking spaces by owned leased property type? So from the question, you can understand that this is a data which is about the parking spaces, and there are different parking spaces like owned, leased, or there are columns like property type, building status, building state, all of these things which I've written. And let me take you to that data as well. So here I am, and this is the data set that we have, where we have our first column as the building city, right? Then the building state. So these are all cities which is in United States, and these are United States related states. And building status, which is your whether it is active, decommissioned, or access. And then finally property type, building structure. And then total parking spaces, which is right from 0 to 6198. And finally you have the next column, which is leased and owned. So from this data we can see that there is a heavy emphasis on the owned or the dimensions that we have. So we have in all 5 dimensions, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and just one measure. So there is a lot of possibilities that one can have or one can develop. So I have developed around 10 different questions and then finally an assignment for you. But you can you can take your creative hat on your head and even keep framing more and more questions. So let's go ahead and see this in action. So our first question is, how is the overall situation of total parking spaces, that is the numeric column, by owned and leased column, and that is a sub question A. Sub question B is by property type. So let's try to answer it within the Tableau. So here we are in the Tableau. Let me go to the data source and click on the Microsoft Excel. And over here we have the supervised real estate across the United States. So when we import this data, you can see that all of those columns like building city, building state, building status, property type, total parking spaces, and owned, leased spaces, all of these are coming properly. And I'll just go ahead and click on sheet. So our first question, if I go back, is overall situation of total parking spaces by owned, leased. So owned and leased is our column. So if we go to total parking spaces, let's say over here in rows, and owned and leased, I will just drag it over here. So it gives me an indication that leased and owned. So leased, there are a lot of leased parking, almost like more than 50%. So this sound looks like a halfway over here, and we can even have the value which is like 158k, which is owned parking spaces, and leased parking spaces is basically 310. Not only this, you can even find the percentages, and that's a small trick that by opening this up, quick table calculation, and then you can have the percent of total. So from the entire data, 65 or 66% is leased, and 33% is owned. So sometimes numbers really doesn't make sense, especially when you are not visualizing, because senior management sometimes loves the matrix and not the visualization, and for them percentage makes a lot of sense. But visualization really helps both the picture about the proportion of data. As we can clearly see that this, from as compared to the leased parking, owned parking is somewhere at the middle or half of it. So you have the option of not only just seeing the entire number, but the different calculation. And if you want, you can clear the table calculation and come back to the normal stage or the normal visualization. So that's our first. Let's have the second question. Second sub question is by the property type. So over here we have property type, and then we have total parking spaces. So clearly giving us that the property type building has a lot of parking spaces, land has very less parking spaces, and structure has a different parking spaces. Now these are like real numbers, but along with that, what you can have is basically not just the sum, but let's say somebody is interested in having the average. So average parking spaces, when we do that, the average really goes in a different way altogether. So in case of structure, the average parking space is more when you compare it with the building. So you see the contrast, that when you use the sum, that means the total parking spaces, building was leading it, but when we said about the average, the structure is leading that. And that explains a lot about the hidden truth within the data when you experiment it, or when you try to answer it from the various different dimensions. So this is about how you can change the measure. Again, you have the options that you can even have the percent of total or percent difference and running total. But not just this, I would also like you to think that total parking space, we have the sum, average, median, as well as count or count distinct. So let's say if we just want to count how many total parking spaces, let's say you are interested in knowing the distribution, then building is really leading the way. That means it has the count is really more in case of the total parking spaces when the property type is building. But when you change it to distinct, let's say what the situation is, so in case of distinct, again you have 478 right from 8,000 value to 478, and over here you have 97, and followed by finally land. So these are like different ways in which you may want to do the analysis based on how business is basically expecting it, and this is usually tell us by the subject matter expert if we are not the subject matter expert. So let's move on. And then within each property, how so we have property type. Within each property, that means within the property type, how is owned and leased. All right, so what I'll do is I'll just come back here and duplicate this. So when I duplicate this, I already have the building type, but what I can take is basically owned and leased column and put it over here. So one option is that it has by default picked it up as color, and we clearly see that leased property type is more as compared to the owned property type, and same is the case with the structure building property type. And in case of land, looks like there is more land as compared to the leased more own land than the leased. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is by taking this and putting it over here. And now for each property type, one can also very clearly see that how is leased and how is owned, how is leased and how is owned, and finally for the structure, leased and owned. So these are like the different ways which I wanted to show you that you can take your visualization to a next level. If you see that color makes a lot of sense for your end user based on their preferences, or they would like to comparison in a most raw way, which is like having the two bars for each owned and leased category. All right, so let's move on. So by building status, okay, total parking spaces by building status. So over here we will come to building status and total parking spaces. All right, so we have active, decommission and access. Clearly active is leading it, that we have a lot of different parkings on the active building status. In case of decommissioned, there are like 2446, and in case of access it is 3983. So that's about how you can answer this question, which is clearly getting an understanding even from the data that active is leading the way. And then finally by building state. So for that, what we can do is we can just pick the building state, hold down the control key and select this total parking spaces and come to show me. And as you can see, Tableau is suggesting that you can use this visualization. So I'll just click on that, and here is our good visualization. So if I'm not really interested again and again in bar chart, I have this as well. So if I want, I can change the size from here. As you can see, it is making it much more appealing. If you would see this over here, the Texas, California and the different other states that you have in the United States, and by the parking, if you want to change the color, you can even change the color from here to whatever that you have an interest. I really like this, or maybe this, or maybe this color. Yeah, looks good. And not only this, you have some options. So if I go back to color again, you also have the option that you can change the opacity also in case there is some overlap, for example over here, right? So in that case, you have the option of border and halo effect. I leave it up to you to experiment with it. So that's about how you will prepare for building state, especially when you know that there is this globe icon which indicates it's a mapping object or a map based object. All right, let's move on to the next question, which is in which building state parking situation is in access, and finally put it in a order. So in which building state parking situation. So so business is not saying us, or I have not framed it in a way which is very straightforward. It's like a normal business question, and we are saying we want to know that by building state the parking that we have only those where the access is there, by which is I think is the building status or property type. So let's look at that. So over here I will create a new sheet, and I have the building status. Yeah, access is present over here. So question is that in which building state parking situation is in access. Okay, so what I'll do is, I know now the building status has the access, but I will take the building state because I want to know in which building state I have the parking in access. So building status, I will put it on filters, dragging it and selecting this and click OK. So once we know over here that this particular state has the parking total parking spaces and access, then I will just go ahead and put it in an order like it has been asked over here. Put it in an order. So when I say put it in an order, that means sort like this. So I can clearly see how each of the state is having the access, which has the topmost, which has the bottommost, and this will help me understand what I need to do next wherever the building status is access. Okay, let's move on and answer the third question, which is building cities that have decommissioned along with total parking. Okay, so building status cities that have been decommissioned. Okay, and building cities that have been status is decommissioned. So I will just go ahead and building status is decommissioned. Okay, and the total parking spaces. So we have this clear overland where you have 2089 and St. Louis this, and if I want I can even change it. Coming from here I can change it to a bar chart, and these values are all 0, but because we have selected that decommissioned parking spaces is something what we need, that's why we are getting these different building cities. So now we have the building cities that have been decommissioned along with total parking. And then in which type of property parking spaces in access, which type of property parking. So property type is here, so I'll just come here in property type and total parking spaces, and they are in access, so that means building status. Let me drag it again, and over here we have access, selected the access. So in case of building and structure, the parking space is in access. And also what you can do is you can show the filter by coming over here and click on show filter, and from here you can even take this question further, give the lot of flexibility to end user. Let's say you want to see both decommissioned and access or just the decommissioned. So over here, so when we select the decommission, only the building property type has the parking spaces which have been decommissioned. So that's a different question altogether that we have just answered. So next question that we have is, where is more active parking, either in owned or in leased? Okay, so property type is owned and leased is over here, so I'll just add it. I'll select the owned and leased, and I want to know the total parking spaces. This is the overall situation, that leased has a lot of parking and owned has less. And now based on the question, what we want to know is where is a more active parking, either in own or lease. So active parking is present somewhere. Active parking is over here in the building status. I'll just select and put it on the filter, and I'll just click this, click OK. And this is how the situation is, that where in the leased you have more active parking as compared to the owned. So not only this, if let's say I just want to remove this, I'll drag it down over here and I put it to make it more interactive. I put it the building status over here on the color. So clearly it shows that leased has all the parking spaces which are active, but owned has some parking spaces which are decommissioned or are in access. So this becomes more visually appealing and more useful from the end user perspective. So next question, states with more leased parking similarly with more owned parking. States with more leased parking and owned parking. Okay, so we have the states over here, we have the total parking spaces. Let's sort it so it looks fine, and I will put owned and leased over here, and this gives us a beautiful visualization which answers this question, states with more leased parking similarly with more owned parking. So this is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, like leased or owned, if this gives any idea, or we can put it in a filter, then we can say leased. So these are the states. First, let's say few states where you have owned parking a lot, and if I click on edit filter, and click on owned. These are the states where you have more owned parking. So you have couple of ways, like I said, either you can put it on filter or you can put it on over here. You can clearly see this picture. All right, let's quickly move on to the next one. Which property type has more active parking? So over here, I'll create a new sheet. Which property type? So property type is here and total parking spaces is here. I will convert it into a metric by clicking over here. Which has more active, so building status, I will just put it over here, and this clearly shows that property type building has the more active parking compared to after that structure and land. And if I click it over here, this also shows the similar picture: active, decommission, and in access. But the property type has come before this. I'll press Ctrl Z. I just removed it accidentally, and I will put it prior to this. So structure first is building, property type has more active parking, structure have more active parking. And then after that, how's the distribution of parking in the city? So looks like a very statistical question. How is the distribution of parking in city by property type? How's the distribution of parking in city by property type? Okay, so let's go ahead. City, parking, and property type. All right, building city, add all members. A lot of cities are there. Property type and total parking spaces and distribution. So I'll put the property type over here for a good visual distribution, and I will sort it. And this shows the distribution, like what I can do is convert into some sort of a percentage. So this is basically the percentage which it has, but not properly calculating because it is taking a total percent. So what I can do is come over here, click on edit table calculation, and I will say table across, and it will give the 100% value as 100%. So it clearly shows 88%, 5.5%, and 6.3%. So now we know the distribution of the property type in each building city. Clearly Silver Spring has a lot of property type which is structure compared to the building. So this way you can see how your data is distributed. So in a lot of these cities, these are all property type is building. So this way you can identify how your data distributed in your entire in your city, particular city, and clearly you can know the percentages to get the distribution. And then how is the distribution of parking by building status and building state? Okay, so building state, parking spaces, and status. All right, and similarly, to easy understand it, we will just distribute it, and clearly this particular is standing out in terms of the distribution, and followed by this particular state, which is I think Maryland. Yeah, no other state is showing a lot of different distribution as compared to the LA, where you have some of the building status which are mentioning access. So from this entire data, one can very clearly see that some distribution is present here as compared to any other state, which is very, very difficult if you are just looking at the data. And then the final question that I have is building states which has 0 parking spaces. A different question altogether, right? So what do we have? Building state and total parking spaces, and I will put the total parking spaces on the filter itself, and I will say the minimum. Next, minimum is 0. Click OK. So the visualization is not changed. That means we need to just make some changes. So we need to remove this from measure to a dimension, and we will say a range of values from 0 to 0 and click OK. And these are our states, some of the states where you have the zero parking. That means looks like all of the state, but you can even look at even the building cities where the zero parking is present. And if we have like more information, like in a particular building city there these are like zero parking, then one can ask that why are we even having the spaces, in case if there is some rent that somebody is giving or expecting a rent, or you need to use it for a altogether different purpose. So this way you can you can clearly see that the different sort of business question, the 10 different business question that we have seen, which are like very common when we need to produce the visualization. And these visualization really helps understand the entire data in a context, so that one can make a decision based on the distribution or based on how each of the variable is interacting with each other. So after that, the final thing is about the assignment that I wanted to give you. So what I want you to do is think like you are a business manager. You have seen the data, and you can even download the data based on the instructions I have given in description that how you can download. So from this data, what you need to do is wear a hat of the CEO of, let's say, this company, and think about a problem that you have related to the parking spaces. And these 10 questions that I have presented, you need to practice for sure, so that you can get to know all of this by yourself. But after you have done that, what you need to do is produce a story based on the problem that you are seeing. Now the problem can be the access parking space, or different distribution of parking spaces, or zero parking spaces, right? Or the problem related to the property type, or owned or leased type, all of that. So wear the creative hat, and put this entire all these visualization into a story. And I would really love to see if you can upload it on the Tableau public, and tell me within the comment section about the story that you have produced, and I would love to see what you have produced. So that's what all I had for you in this video, and I hope you enjoyed this small project, or the data exploration project. And I would really love to see your comments. What do you think about it? What would you like to learn more about this from these types of project? And that will help me create the new videos for the future. So thank you so much, and I will meet you in the next video.